Kael had killed for these men for 10 years. Now they stood in a neat line at the edge of a pit and watched him die. The nobles he had bled for. The commander whose life he had personally saved 3 separate times. Not one of them looked away as the archers drew. Not one of them looked the slightest bit ashamed. To a man like that, a mercenary was a tool, and a tool that had seen too much was simply thrown into a hole and buried. The last thing Kael saw was the golden commander smiling down at him. The last thing he felt was the cold creeping into his chest. And then he opened his eyes in a body 17 years old, years before the war that killed him had even begun, with the face of every man who betrayed him burned into the back of his skull. To understand why those men wanted Kael dead, you have to understand what Kael was. He was nothing. A boy from a border village the Empire burned for taxes it had invented. No name worth saying, no family left to say it. He survived the only way the lowborn survive in a kingdom built on other people's blood. He picked up a sword, and he sold it. Mercenaries are the Empire's favorite lie. When the great houses wage their endless wars, they do not send their own sons to the front. They send men like Kael, men with no house to mourn them, no record that they ever existed at all. They are the shield you hold between yourself and the arrows, and when the battle is won, they are the witnesses you make certain never speak. Kael learned that lesson slowly, across 10 years and 100 battlefields. He learned it completely on the day they buried him alive. For most of his life, Kael believed in something, not the Empire, the men beside him. The mercenary company was the closest thing to a family he had ever been allowed to have. Old Garrick, who taught him how to hold a line when his hands would not stop shaking, the twins, who never stopped laughing even with blood in their teeth, a dozen brothers who owned nothing in this world but each other and the promise of the next contract. On paper, they were expendable. To Kael, they were the only thing that had ever been his, and the Golden Commander knew it. Lord Adrian Valmont was everything Kael was not. Highborn, gilded, adored by a kingdom that had never once seen the cost of his victories. He used Kael's company the way a butcher uses a blade he never has to clean. Throw them at the wall. Let them break it open. Let them bleed so that better men could march through the gap. Then came the valley. Valmont ordered Kael's company to hold a narrow pass against an army 3 times their number, and he promised reinforcements that he had never, for one moment, intended to send. It was not a battle. It was a disposal. Kael watched his brothers die one by one in the freezing mud, still shouting that help was on its way, while Valmont sat his horse on the ridge above and calmly watched a problem solve itself. Kael survived. That was his real mistake. A mercenary who lives through a slaughter he was meant to die in is not a hero. He is a loose end. So they came to him with smiles. They called it an honor, a private audience with the commander himself. They walked him down into an old quarry. And the men he had spent a decade bleeding to protect filled that pit with arrows, turned their horses around, and rode home to dinner. Kael died in the dark, crushed beneath the bodies of strangers, hating himself most of all for ever believing he had earned a place among them. He was wrong about one thing. The dying did not take. He woke up 17 years old, whole, unscarred, standing in the middle of a market square in a city that, in his first life, would not burn to the ground for another 4 years. The first thing Kael felt was not joy. It was the crushing weight of knowing. He remembered every battle before it would be fought, every betrayal before it would even be planned. He knew which lords would rise and which would rot, which border would erupt into war, which silver mine would flood, which plague would empty which city. He had died holding the single most valuable thing in the world, a perfect memory of a future that no one else alive had seen. And this time, he did not pick up a sword in order to sell it. This time, he picked it up to use it. He started small and cold and patient. He dug up the war chest he knew was buried beneath a battlefield that had not happened yet. He bought secrets while they were still cheap. He relearned the brutal sword forms that had cost him a decade of pain the first time. And now he swallowed them in a fraction of the time because his body was young, but his instincts were a dead veteran's. Other boys his age were still afraid of the dark. Kael had already died in it. But Kael did not gather all that power to crown himself a lord. He gathered it to keep a promise that no one had ever asked him to make. He went looking for his brothers. He found the twins, still laughing, still breathing, years before the contract that would gut them both. One by one, Kael tracked down every man who had died for absolutely nothing in his first life, and one by one, he quietly pulled them off the road that was going to kill them. He could never tell them why. He could only make certain that this time, when the valley came, not one of them would be standing in it. The first time Kael drew a blade in this second life, the men around him went quiet. He was a boy, barely more than a recruit, and he moved like something that had been killing for 30 years. There was no wasted motion in him, no fear, no hunger for glory. He fought the way a man fights when he already knows exactly how and where he is supposed to die, and has simply decided that it will not be today. Veterans twice his age started calling him captain before he had earned a single rank. They did not know they were following a dead man. They only knew that when Kael said, "Move," the ones who listened lived. The hardest part was Garrick. In his first life, the old man had died in that valley with Kael's name in his mouth, swearing to the mud that the boy would have made something of himself. Now Kael found him years earlier in a border tavern, loud and whole and gloriously, stupidly alive, with no idea who the cold young swordsman buying his drinks even was. Kael could not tell him. He could not say, "You taught me to hold a line. You died for a lie. I clawed my way back through death itself to make sure you never have to." He could only pull the old man's future out from under the blade that was meant to take it and sit there and watch a man he had already buried laugh like the world was not ending. For one moment, it almost felt like it had all been worth it. And he watched Valmont. Now that Kael knew exactly what the Golden Commander truly was, the mask was almost insulting to look at. The easy public charm, the borrowed victories, and the thing Valmont had buried in that valley, the real reason an entire company of witnesses had to vanish overnight. In his first life, Kael had been a tool that never once understood the hand that swung it. Now, he was a man who had already read the whole game to its final page, and he was simply waiting, patiently, for the right moment to flip the board over. And then, for the first time in 2 lifetimes, Kael stood face to face with Valmont as something close to an equal. The Golden Commander looked at him and saw a promising young captain, a useful tool, a sword he might one day get to swing. He wore the same easy smile he had worn at the edge of the pit. He did not recognize the man he had already murdered, and Kael smiled back because he had finally uncovered the secret buried in that valley. Valmont had not fed an entire company to the enemy to win a battle. He had sold that pass to the enemy for a fortune, let a border town burn for the coin, and slaughtered the only witnesses who could ever prove the great war hero had been a traitor all along. Kael's brothers had not died for the kingdom. They had died to keep one man's ledger clean. When the war that Kael remembered finally arrived, it did not unfold the way Valmont had written it. Every trap the commander laid, Kael had already quietly disarmed. Every disposable company Valmont tried to feed into the enemy's teeth, Kael had already turned into something that bit back. The lords who were meant to be Valmont's stepping stones found themselves, one after another, bound by quiet debts to a nameless mercenary captain who always, impossibly, seemed to know what was coming before it came. And Kael did not kill Valmont in the dark, the way Valmont had killed him. He did it in the light, in front of everyone. He let the valley happen one more time, on his own terms. He let the Golden Commander give the very same order, set the very same trap, promise the very same reinforcements that would never come. And when Valmont turned in his saddle to watch another company of expendable men die for him, he found the pass already full of Kael's soldiers. The trap sprung backward on its maker, and every highborn lord who had ever quietly signed off on a massacre standing in the exact spot where the evidence could finally reach them. The secret Valmont had buried came clawing back up out of the ground. The victories he had stolen were traced, one corpse at a time, back to the men who had actually paid for them. The war hero became the war criminal in the span of a single afternoon, and this time there was no nameless mercenary left to take the fall for him, because the nameless mercenary was the one standing there holding the knife. In his first life, Kael was thrown into a pit and forgotten. In this one, He made the whole kingdom watch as the men who dug it climbed in. But here is the part the story will not let you forget. Kael saved his brothers. He took his revenge. He tore down every man who had ever used him and walked away holding everything they had stolen. He won completely. And yet the boy who had only ever wanted a place to belong spent his entire second life becoming the one thing he had sworn he would never be. A weapon that feels nothing at all. He kept his brothers breathing, but he could never quite bring himself to sit at the fire beside them again, because the man who climbed out of that pit was not the boy who had fallen into it. He got his vengeance. The question the story leaves you holding is whether there was anything left of him to enjoy it. So tell me what you think. Did Kael earn the right to burn them all down, or did dying once already cost him the only part of himself that was ever worth saving? Drop your verdict in the comments. I read every single one. And if you made it all the way to the end here, you already belong here. Follow Dark Manhwa recaps for more stories where the protagonist does not come back the same. New recap every Thursday.